Hey, Mockingcasters. RJ here. Before we begin, just a couple things. Number one, this has been a big year for the Mockingcast. A tough year, but a big year. We've seen our listenership grow by about 50%, and we're now firmly entrenched in the top 4% of all podcasts, and that's all thanks to you. So thanks for listening and for spreading the word, and we certainly hope, or at least I personally hope, that listening to the podcast has been as helpful this year as recording it. So that being said, we need your support. We depend entirely on the generosity of our listeners to support not just this podcast, but the 4 other podcasts that we have, as well as the quarterly, the publications, the conferences, and the 9 full and part-time employees who work so hard day in and day out to bring you the good news of the gospel in a way that connects with our everyday lives. Oh, and of course the blog as well, right, where it all started. This year, we have made it really easy to give. If you just get out your phone and you text MCAST, M-C-A-S-T, your phone will try to autocorrect it to NCAA football, but that's not it. M-C-A-S-T to the number 77948. You will get a link where you can either make a one-time or recurring monthly donation. And just as a reminder, if you make a recurring monthly donation of $10 or more, you will automatically receive a free copy of the amazing Mockingbird Quarterly magazine. So please take a moment to text MCAST to 77948. Okay, now for one more thing. As you're about to hear, what we say in the podcast is that this will be our second to last episode of the year, our penultimate episode. But actually, it's going to be our final episode of 2020. And that's because right after we recorded, Sarah Condon received word of a couple of unexpected and very painful deaths in her family. And so we ask you to keep Sarah, Josh, her children, the entire Condon family in your prayers, especially as we head into Christmas. So please keep the Condon family in your prayers. And of course, we will look forward to seeing you in 2021. Thank you so much. And may God bless you.
Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in just a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every week to explore a few of the places where we currently see grace, and its absence, playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. Glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.
Part 1. Ellie dreams of having a mermaid baby. Not just a mermaid, and not just a baby. A mermaid baby. Being the adventurous gift buyer that I am, I searched and finally found a handmade mermaid baby doll on Etsy. In the pictures online, it appeared that Pearl, the doll, was wearing a veil of some sort, but no, that was her creepy and weird skin. When Pearl arrives, I'm thrilled. I show her to several teenage students who react to her face in sheer horror. I ignore this reaction, knowing that Ellie will love Pearl. Part 2, Christmas morning. Ellie wakes up and excitedly runs to the tree to find Pearl. The video is attached so you can see the real-time reaction. Basically, she was like, "Oh my God, this doll is hideous. What is wrong with you, Santa?" Ellie later notes that Pearl was her first indication that Santa was not real. Part 3. Ellie is so grossed out by Pearl that she affectionately refers to her as disgusting. We had just watched Inside Out. I come to the desperate conclusion that Pearl's hideousness lies in her strange green locks of hair. I go to CVS and purchase 2 different colors of hair dye and attempt to dye Pearl's hair from green to a strong blonde. My attempts fail miserably, and Ellie looks to me with pity for a few days. "Pearl's hair is even more hideous, Mom. Please just stop." Ellie's babysitters have begun staring at my multiple L'Oreal and Clairol kits. Ellie refuses to hold Pearl. I am, of course, devastated by my failure and more determined than ever to remedy it. Part 4, the doll hospital. I locate a doll and teddy bear hospital in Secaucus, New Jersey. I call them immediately and discover it is run by a group of very strict and serious Germans. They take their doll and teddy bear hospital very seriously. They are interested in seeing Pearl's condition, and then they will give me an estimate for all of the cosmetic work that needs to be done to make her, quote, lovable. Poor Pearl. I ask Ellie to bring Pearl on the airplane to Tennessee to visit Leslie. Ellie refuses, pointing out Pearl's many, many hideous traits. Part 5, sending off Pearl. I pack Pearl up in a box and address it to the doll hospital. I tell Ellie that Pearl is going to the doll hospital to have her face and hair adjusted. Ellie wisely informs me that Pearl has even greater problems than those. Then she proceeds to write on the box, please, please help this doll. She has so many problems. Part 6, I hear nothing from the Germans. Clearly, they want nothing to do with poor Pearl. I call a few times and ask about a price, offer to send money. They keep forgetting who I am until I say, my doll is Pearl, the mer-baby. Then the Germans say, oh, God, yes, okay. I finally get a very expensive answer and immediately send them more money. The work begins. Part 7. I was teaching on a crisp January morning when my phone rang. I ignored it and then listened to the message between students. It was a detective from the Secaucus Police Department. He really needed to talk to me immediately. Part 8. The big reveal. The detective tells me that the Germans called the police. Sorry. The detective tells me that the Germans called the police down to the doll hospital that morning. When they removed Pearl's head to paint her offensive skin, they found 2 ounces of cocaine stuffed in the doll's head. The detective first suggests that the drugs are mine. I adamantly argue and insist I have never seen cocaine in my life. He relents, agreeing it would be strange for me to stuff cocaine in a doll's head and then ship it to an expensive doll hospital. Then, in what is probably the strangest conversation of my life, the detective asked me what was, quote, up with Pearl. Did a weird uncle put drugs in Pearl's head 30 years ago? And then I inherited Pearl. I explained what Ellie wanted for Christmas, how I found Pearl on Etsy, and why I shipped her off to the Germans. The detective then said, you spent money on this doll? Have you ever heard of Ariel? She's a pretty mermaid. You can buy her at any Disney store. And I said, detective, Ariel is a grown-up mermaid. The detective said it seemed to be challenging to Ellie's mother, and then went on to reveal that this is the strangest thing to ever happen at the DEA in New Jersey. After obtaining all my Etsy information, he hung up and went to work. I called my mom to alert her the detectives from the DEA might be coming by to search the house for more drugs. She laughs and laughs and laughs. The New Jersey DEA and Alabama DEA are now working together to plan a sting on the doll maker in Alabama. Then he said, I'm sorry to disappoint your daughter, but Pearl can't come home. She is going to be locked away in an evidence room awaiting an international drug trial. Sorry. I hung up the phone and told Ellie, honey, Pearl is going to stay at the doll hospital for longer than we had anticipated. It turns out that she has many problems. Ellie nodded and said, I told you, Mom, that doll is messed up. The end. Everything we do for our children, we try to get the best Christmas gift and accidentally buy a mer-baby stuffed with cocaine and become embroiled in an international drug smuggling ring. I hope all of your holidays, Christmases, and New Year's are exactly what you planned and are mermaid and drug-free. And if cocaine accidentally shows up under your tree, know that I understand that you tried your best.
Well, that's amazing. That is, you sent this out a couple weeks ago, and we knew that we were going to have to start the episode with it, because that is a thing of great beauty, and I don't know what to say except for have a blessed Advent.
I just think it's such a word of grace for all of us moms who, I think 100 years ago, first of all, kids got one toy, but you went to the store and they were like, there was a doll, there was a truck, right? There were like very few options. And now with Etsy,
a slingshot,
you can make all their dreams come true. I have a friend whose daughter asked for a cloud with a hat, and she's figuring it out right now.
Done and done.
By the way, we will include a link to pictures of Pearl because the reality is just as
Horrifying.
strange as the story.
So terrifying.
This is yes, stranger than fiction.
Only from Alabama.
Well, how
Would
is
something like Pearl come?
We haven't recorded in a couple weeks. How's life been? And we're probably beginning the scramble. I just finished put up the Mockingbird gift guide, and so I've been thinking about what to get for Christmas. Most of that, of course, that gift guide is intentionally ridiculous. But the
Yeah, don't actually buy things from that.
but it is definitely on my mind, and it's just beginning to feel a lot like Christmas time. How's it going in Heyman and Condon world?
I mean, I do all my Christmas shopping really early, so no big deal, but I'm done.
No, you're not. Are you
No, I'm
serious?
totally done. I was done
my
2 weeks
goodness,
ago.
That's crazy.
Well, it's just because I learned.
Good for you.
It's because if you've got two priests in the family, you have to do this stuff early because someone will get the flu, and now we're in a global pandemic, so someone may get something much worse. So I just have to be prepared. So I'm pretty neurotic about it. So I have all of it, and then now it's just wrapping everything. But yeah, I have this mom group I'm a part of, and we were all talking about like how to prepare for Advent and what we're getting people for Christmas, and they had such beautiful like simple Christmas answers, and yeah, we don't do that. We buy a lot of stuff. RJ, what's going on for you?
I don't know what to say, man. I'm so tired of this whole thing. You know, I'm tired of the pandemic.
Yeah,
and it's I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. You know, people are I was telling you guys earlier. People are getting married and their family can't attend, and people are passing away and friends can't go to their funerals, and it's and we're heading into Christmas, which no one kind of knows what it's going to look like, but it's not going to look like any Christmas we've ever celebrated before, and so it's a difficult time. I'm just going to say that, and I'm excited that the vaccine is on the way. I'm excited for life to get back to normal, whatever that's gonna look like, but I don't know. I can't believe it's like 2 weeks till Christmas.
Well, at least the Washington football team.
They did.
Had a
they took down the
triumphant
Steelers. My
thought of
poor
you.
son Spencer, who's a massive Steelers fan, was not happy that their first loss was to the Washington football team. By the way, I hear you're a bit of a sports fan, Washington fan. One of your sons is kind of enamored of that Alex Smith. Is that right?
Yes. It took a child getting into the NFL to drag me in. So here I am. And
That's so good, Dave. That's
rooting
why I'm
for-
with Pokemon.
You chose the worst team, just so you know. So well done.
No, I didn't,
chose the-
because the New York Jets are out there, and we all know that, if you
that's
really
true,
want
that's
disappointment,
true.
you can. That's my childhood football team. If you're a glutton for punishment, root for the Jets.
GTS, yeah.
Things here in Charlottesville are clicking along, I suppose. Like a lot of people, we were sort of grounded for Thanksgiving because otherwise our kids would have to go virtual again. And
Not worth it.
Not worth it. 4 days with my wonderful family is not worth 2 weeks with my kids.
100%.
Terrible to say, but it ended up being a very simple time and with beautiful weather and stuff. So I can't complain. But like you, it's filled with just this interminable waiting, not just for Advent, but for life and what's gonna happen. And I mean, I'm excited about the news about the vaccine that seems to be coming.
Praise God. It's
fast and
incredible.
furious.
So
Yes.
fast, yeah.
Though I also have a feeling how it gets parceled out is going to be the subject of a lot of conversation.
Consternation.
Not on here. Yeah, we're not talking about it, so.
No.
Yeah, I do want to say, just like in case, like, I feel bad that I said that I was done Christmas shopping, in case like it caused anxiety in people. Like, I shop early. Just to be clear, I shop early for Christmas just because I always feel like death is imminent, but this year it feels more so.
So instead of get in the pool, you're going to die. It's do your shopping
Do
on
your
Black
shopping
Friday.
early,
Christmas presents.
because you
It's-
never know.
Yes.
Okay?
Well, thank you, Sarah. More words of wisdom from our.
A color change Barbie will comfort Annie in case something happens to me between now and Christmas.
Praise the Lord. And hopefully it will not appear to be, what is it, a veiled
Won't be a baby mermaid or filled with
baby
cocaine.
mermaid filled with cocaine. Woo. Well, we've got a couple of fun things to talk about today. The first is library books. This was a sort of an unexpected treasure in the New York Times, written by Ben Dolnick. In praise of library books, a small antidote to a life of perpetual dissatisfaction. And he describes wanting to buy a book that he was looking forward to, but then realizing that the library, which was a couple blocks from where he lived, also had it, and kind of going down, deciding that maybe he needed to go the library route. This is what he writes. He said, "The library had, for the 1,000th time, performed its mundane magic trick. It had vaulted me into the future, the prosaic, dog-eared, heaped by the bedside future that this book and I would, however promising our first encounter, inevitably have ended up having anyway. The initial flush of book lust promises, this book will change everything. This will be the one that finally gets you into epic poetry. This will teach you how to meditate. The library says, this book will contain a stranger's ancient receipt and will be out of your life in 3 weeks. In dispelling my fantasies of permanence, the library does more than save me the cost of a paperback. It provides me with a template for navigating the great sea of longing and disappointment that is life. Imagine a library of expensive clothes in which you could see the shirt you're considering spending $98 on as it will look once it has gotten an eradicable oil stain on its chest. The library, in addition to its many civic duties, can function as a great engine of personal clarity, of facing facts, of recognizing that life is not, in the main, a pristine hardcover with decal edges. It is a threadbare thing from a few decades ago whose binding is barely hanging on, in which someone unstable once went to town with a lime green highlighter. Library-induced realism is a great thing, one that can do much to increase your happiness, because the world in which you are perpetually under the impression that the next book purchase, the next apartment, the next significant other will be the one that finally delivers the goods is not a life of happiness. It is a life of perpetual dissatisfaction, a life of thin and sugary highs followed by long and unenlightening lows. The library is, with its careworn and temporary offerings, as lovely and as poignant a reminder of our actual human condition as the tides or a forest in fall. To quote Penelope Fitzgerald, whose books are well worth owning, our lives are only lent to us. This was convicting for me. I'm not much of a library goer these days.
Have you taken children to the library? First question.
Yes.
Okay. Have you let them check a lot of books out? Second question.
Yes.
Okay. How many of those books have you paid for because you could not find them?
No comment. A few in our recent move. I was like, where did we get this book? Oh, from the Houston Public Library.
Right.
Oh, from...
I mean, they won't even let me in the door there at this point. So, this
property of St. Martin's Preschool.
So, yeah.
Let me refer you to the DEA in Secaucus, New Jersey.
Exactly. Right. This is so lovely and sounds really nice when I don't have kids at home, but they've kind of ruined the library for me because I always had this whimsical vision of because there are moms mostly that are on top of their lives enough that they take their kids to the library weekly, and they get to pick stuff out and bring it home and they read it, and then they must put it in a magical place where you don't lose things, and then the next week, and we go twice a year, we check out 45 books, we bring 5 back, and I just owe the Houston Public Library a lot of money.
I mean, I haven't checked a book personally out of a library in a long time, and partly he does uncover this sort of thing. I've talked before about how I'm a collector and I like to be surrounded by things that comfort me, or in days gone by, it's always the books you read and the books you said you read, and sort of you're creating a persona through the stacks of books on your wall or whatever. And libraries, I feel like, it would do me well, I think, to have my illusion of permanence, or the sense that this next purchase will fulfill me in any regard, whether it be books or something, comic books, or whether it be, toys or anything on our gift guide right now. But RJ, what about you?
It feels like a corollary to the arrival fallacy, right? Except rather than like once I achieve this thing, I'll be happy. It's once I have this thing, I'll be happy. It's a little bit more immediate satisfaction, whether it's that new pair of shoes or that book or when that movie comes out or when that CD, when my favorite band comes out with their next CD, when Axl Rose
Chinese
drops
democracy.
his next Chinese will change everything. Chinese democracy will change everything, and you enjoy it for a little while, and then and maybe you come back to, as you said, Dave, we got some nostalgia about it that you can ride out for a little while. It's tough to talk about right now, though, because, what we wouldn't all do for just like a little bit of relief and distraction.
Yeah.
I was talking to a lovely member of my parish who's been struggling with some health issues, and then they thought they had it figured out, and they don't have it figured out, and they got to do some more tests and procedures, and she was just so done with it all.
Yeah.
And she said the hardest thing is that all these coping mechanisms that we used to have, all these distractions, all these sources of joy have been taken away. And so now it's like you're lonely, you're navigating this thing, you can't do anything, and you're sort of stuck with yourself. So it's tough, and that's sort of brought up in this little article, right? That he can't really go to the library; he has to wait for it to pick it up and then drop it in the bin afterwards. So I don't know. I don't think I'd be so attached to those little shots of normalcy.
Yet there's something to, I think, even in the midst of like a health scare. The line from Penelope Fitzgerald that our lives are only lent to us, that our children are only lent to us, that our vocations are only lent to us. I mean, that is not a very worldly sentiment, to be honest with you.
No, it's not.
And this guy's writing in the New York Times, but the booming voice from the culture, and of course the one that is inside my own head, is really that my life is my own, and I better make the most of it. And if I don't, then I have failed some cosmic test, or I don't deserve love, or what have you, or whether maybe you do this with a to-do list. I don't know what it is, but the sense that your life is only lent to you, that it belongs to God, can be initially unsettling and scary. It's also of deep hope and comfort that that I'm not ultimately in charge, and that there's another final word that's not the number of books I read or the number of books that I say that I read. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I was thinking somewhere probably halfway through the pandemic, I had the thought that if I just got a new coffee table, my life would be completely better. All my problems would go away. Our living room would have like 2 feet more room in it because our coffee table is too big for the living room. And Josh just kind of was like, okay, babe. Okay. I mean, whatever you need to do.
Go for it.
Put on a mask, go up to Pottery Barn. We don't usually buy furniture there. It's expensive, but it is close. Okay. Maybe they've got good sales, whatever. So I go up to Pottery Barn, look around to determine the coffee table that most, signifies the gospel in my life, and come home, and I'm like, we're getting this coffee table. And he's like, okay. He's like, the coffee table is kind of the cafeteria table for our kids right now, because they watch television every day during lunch. And it's kind of the art table too, because they tend to haul out all their glue and stuff, and they kind of lay on it sometimes, like upside down, when they've watched a whole lot of television. And I don't know if they can do that on this small marble top thing that you think we need from Pottery Barn. And I was like, it was just this moment where I was like, oh, this is not going to fix all my problems. Which is not to say that I don't then go, you know what, I'm going to get a new lipstick, because that honestly is a very inexpensive way to get a similar bump. But, I think there is something really wonderful, Dave, about what you're saying, that our lives are not ultimately our own. Neil just had his 10th birthday, and it's like we have less time with him left in the house, than, we've got 8 years left. And he's such an incredible, beautiful boy. Josh is like, we got a lot of work to do. But we know he will leave at some point. And yeah, that's a really, it's the impermanence of things that is so freeing and also so terrifying that we kind of live in right now. And all the time. I mean, I think there's a reason we see older people at the library a lot, right? Because they don't have 7-year-olds that are going to check out too many books and then lose them. And they understand, and I've seen this in my own parents, the temporariness of the stuff that they buy now. Do you know what I mean?
They don't want to accumulate more things, too.
Yeah, they're not going to have it for 40 years. Like, we're going to get it at some point. And so I think, I think the prayer is that we can all move into that.
Anything else, RJ?
It feels like we've been learning this lesson for the past 6 months or 9 months. I guess what I thought about was when we first were talking about the pandemic back in March or April, and we were living in places where it hadn't really hit yet, and we were being a little bit flip about it. And we got an email from one of our just wonderful pastor listeners who's up in the Northeast and was like, you got to understand the reality of what's going on right now. And now we're kind of we're all living that. I mean, I think the idea of our lives being lent to us, of impermanence, of uncertainty, of day-to-day existence is something that we are all living right in the middle of, and kind of doing it alone. And it's just hard, So I don't know. It's like, the fact that we're in the middle of Advent, a season of waiting, a season of watching, a season of hope, I think it fits perfectly with kind of the pandemic moment we're in, and yet that's what we've been talking about for 9 months.
Yeah.
It's like we need a little arrival at some point.
I know. No more Advent. Down with Advent.
No, come
Christmas.
Come
please.
on, we're ready. We're ready.
I'm like,
and then at the same time,
go
I've
ahead.
been joking with my congregation. I was like, well, because once we all get vaccinated, all our lives will be perfect, just like they were before. And of course they won't be. But this has been a time where so many of the things that we take for granted, just the ability just to get together, to be around one another. Hopefully we will take them for granted again someday, but maybe hopefully not for a little while. It reminds me of, we moved into New York City right like the weekend after 9/11, which was a crazy time to be there. But there was a sense of compassion and love and sort of community in New York because that had happened, that I think hadn't been there before. Yeah. So hopefully that, 2020 has been a hard year. Hopefully 2021 will be better. And people, this is maybe too much to hope for. People will be more patient, more joyful, that there'll be a sense of just release.
By the way, when it comes to this permanence and impermanence, I had a lesson taught to me the other day, and that I had, this is how ridiculous I am. I had ordered some wax packs from 1985 of Goonies trading cards because I loved the way that the package was designed. And my sons, who love Goonies, had come into my office one day.
Oh, no.
And they, one of my sons, I won't single him out, but he took these unopened packs that I had waited for, and they were not that expensive, but I had waited for them. And he went home and he opened them and he threw out the wrappers, and he apparently had a long talk with my wife about how unfair it is that dad gets all this stuff and doesn't share it with the kids, and that it's kid stuff, it's not dad's stuff.
Oh.
And he
has a point.
I've never seen him steal stuff.
He
but
actually
did.
called us, and we were going to talk to you about that.
I'm glad you brought it up.
The truth is,
less awkward.
He enjoyed those packs a hell of a lot more than I have, just sitting them on there. And then the next week, when
you've now become Will Ferrell in the Lego movie.
Another sign. I know.
Don't touch the crackle. The crackle. Don't touch my Legos.
I was like, what is this permanence? This whole stuff is here to be enjoyed, not to be just gawked at. And then another son was gotten really into Lord of the Rings, and he wanted to read the nice editions I have of them. And I was like, okay, here you go. And within seconds, the map had been torn out, and and I thought to myself, but this is what they're for. And
yes.
I needed this sort of
totally agree.
sanctifying experience, but it's funny that it took that's the form it took. So, Lord,
I have a just completely ratchet American Girl doll that is upstairs in Annie's room that was discontinued. I think I could probably get $400 for it on eBay, and I was just like, "Here, babe." It's just what? And I mean,
what am I saving it for?
Yeah, what am I saving it for? Go to town, give her a haircut. I don't care. This is meant to be played with. Yeah.
Well, in my case, it was also my yearning for the past getting interrupted with the the actuality of the
that.
present
Yes.
and the present blessing, in fact, that is far surpasses whatever sort of hoped for non-existent past that I'm trying to recreate in my office.
Josh says it's your fault that I'm spending so much money on eBay on It's a Wonderful Life Christmas Village.
Oh, I'll
stuff.
accept
He's
that
like,
blame.
This is Dave's fault.
Like on the other hand, Sarah, we need all the comfort we can get. And if
Exactly.
It's a Wonderful Life,
I'm glad you both have your coping mechanisms.
recreations can give you a little bit of something to look forward
It gave
to.
me so much comfort.
I've seen the
I
Instagram
got
of
the
it.
luggage shop, okay? Do you know how many people wanted that? I paid $45 for the light up luggage shop.
I looked it up afterwards. I was like, how much do these It's a Wonderful Life things cost? I was like, whoa.
Yeah, they're a lot. Yeah.
It's a beautiful
Especially
thing.
right
Bedford
now.
Falls.
People are dying for a little, nostalgia and joy.
Well, speaking of the present tense, this is gonna. We rarely delve this explicitly into headlines, but here you go, because this was sent a lot to us by.
We try to stay as irrelevant as possible.
We do. That's
We
that's
do.
actually our mission statement. You guys don't know that, but we're like
It is,
shooting
it
for
is.
irrelevance. Every
I consider it
podcast.
timelessness, but you guys call it whatever you want. The rise and fall of Carl Lentz, the celebrity pastor of Hillsong Church, a long sort of piece of investigative journalism by Ruth Graham, a wonderful reporter in New York Times Magazine. Now, those of you who don't know who Carl Lentz is, he's a pastor of Hillsong in New York, which is he's also known as sort of Justin Bieber's pastor, and he's been photographed in that regard. So this goes far beyond actually just the Christian
Snappy dresser.
sphere.
He is a snappy dresser.
He is.
I'll read a little bit of it to you, but this is really our jumping off point, not for weighing his own
We're not talking about his glasses.
drama
Dave.
and more about Christian celebrity itself. As for Mr. Lenz, the association with Mr. Bieber catapulted Lenz as a 42-year-old into the new stratosphere of fame, in which he became not just a friend of celebrities, but a celebrity himself. He was interviewed by Oprah Winfrey and showed up on Kourtney Kardashian's Instagram. But as Mr. Lentz's profile rose, many congregants of Hillsong, New York, felt the focus on fame and cultural power that had helped the church grow was overwhelming its spiritual mission. Last month, it all came crashing down for Mr. Lentz in a scandal that has cast a shadow on one of the most influential megachurches in America, and it was revealed that he'd had at least one, possibly more, extramarital affairs. Sexual infidelity was only one piece of the story, however. Mr. Houston, Brian Houston, who's the head of Hillsong sort of International, connected Lentz's dismissal to, quote, general narcissistic behavior, manipulating, mistreating people, as well as breaches of trust connected to lying and constantly lying. At a time when many Americans have abandoned regular church-going, Hillsong attracts thousands of young churchgoers through soaring music and upbeat preaching. Indeed, their music is extremely popular. If anything, Hillsong is cooler than everyday life, with celebrities like actor and singer Selena Gomez and NBA star Kevin Durant showing up at Sunday services. But there was another side to Hillsong in its most popular branch in America, according to many current and former attendees. A pastor who was so swept up in ministering to the famous that ordinary congregants felt neglected. A culture that worshipped wealth while making volunteers cater to leaders as royalty. And a sense that for all the celebrity surrounding the church, its soul was harder to find. When he did appear on Sundays, Lentz rarely mixed with churchgoers. On Sundays, a team of congregants working as volunteers prevented anyone without the right badge from wandering backstage, and only a few had clearance to enter the green room stocked with a lavish catering spread and changes of clothes to fit Mr. Lentz's increasingly particular tastes. The church seemed to go out of its way to cultivate a hierarchy of coolness. A reserved seating section for VIPs appeared at the front of the church and then expanded to take up multiple rows. One former volunteer that said that when high-profile entertainers or sports stars would try to slip into the main seating area, content to worship with ordinary churchgoers, ushers were often instructed to guide them to the special section in front or to whisk them backstage to meet Mr. Lentz. The staff built this culture and made them a big deal, this volunteer said. A lot of us felt torn because it doesn't feel like something Jesus would do. Now, I want to move on to what commentary on this, what David French wrote as the crisis of Christian celebrity. But before I do, any just sort of initial thoughts on this scenario. I've never been to a Hillsong service, though I'm familiar with some of the music. But I also know that a lot of this was taking place right around the corner from Calvary St. George's in New York, where we have our conferences, and it was of some consternation to those who were worshiping in that scenario. Just the kind of high fashion, explosive popularity of this church that was in their neighborhood. But Sarah, RJ, where are you?
I have some thoughts. I mean, first I'll just admit that, Hillsong New York started roughly the same time that I also planted a church in New York City, and needless to say, it's been slightly more successful than my own endeavor. And so I'm not going to pretend like there isn't a little bit of kind of like delicious sinful satisfaction in his downfall. Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and admit that in this penitential.
This is why we love you, RJ Heyman. Yes.
But I think, to me, this is really about narcissism. I just want to say, and I think there is something inherently dangerous and a bit narcissistic about Christian leadership, generally speaking. Okay, the idea that you're going to speak for God, that you have something to say that people might want to hear, that you should be paid, for your spiritual wisdom and insight and pastoral sensitivity, and so I think I just want to call that out. That and that's going to dovetail a little bit in the article the next article you're going to read, Dave. And I think there's two things that are tough about that. One is that the more successful, quote, in the world's eyes, the more successful you become in ministry, the more you're allowed to kind of like do the things that you want to do, the things that you're good at, and maybe you are relieved from the responsibility of not doing the things that you don't want to do. And that I think what's important in Christian ministry is that you do the things that are hard. You do the things that you don't want to do. You spend time with suffering people, because that's what's going to keep. That's what keeps a person, I think, grounded in Christian leadership and doesn't allow them to get into their own head too much. Doesn't allow them to buy into any kind of myth about their own importance or that it's important to do the hard things. The other thing that's difficult is that it feels like, to a degree, narcissism works, right? If you think it sort of feeds on itself, and if you think you're the best and other people think you're the best, there's something inherently attractive about that level of self-confidence and positivity, and it's just really dangerous. And lying seems to work too, because Christian people want to, and I think are sort of predisposed in a beautiful way to think the best of people and to trust people and to believe people, especially their leaders.
Yeah.
And so you can get away with lying. So it's just a very difficult thing. And of course, personally, I would love to reach a place where I only have to do what I want to do and don't have to do any of the stuff I don't want to do. But I know there's a danger in that. That if someone shows up on Sundays to sort of preach and teach and is not visiting hospitals, is not spending time with dying people, is not spending time with non-celebrities, I think there's a real danger to that when the message becomes divorced from the reality, the truth of just real life.
Yeah.
And so I find this to be just a huge cautionary tale for myself and for people in positions of Christian leadership in general, just to be very careful when you start to believe the hype about yourself a little bit too much, or you feel the need to,
or at all,
stop telling the truth,
right?
Out of a need to sort of make things seem better than they actually are.
Yeah.
Those are my thoughts.
Sarah?
I think it's sad for me that he didn't have anything in his life that was kind of pulling him back to the ground. I'm really sad for him. I'm sad for his marriage. I think it's really easy as an Episcopalian because our churches, even our biggest churches, are not that big. And so I think it's really easy for us to be like, oh, well, this is the problem with these mega churches. And it's not. It's just the
No.
problem with people.
Yes.
And I might venture to say there's a correlation with gender as well, although I do know some cases of women having done this kind of thing in leadership. So that is, this is like a weird, sick fascination, and you should probably edit this, but I'm interested to see as more and more women get these major positions if we start to see this behavior in women. I think we've already seen a little bit of it, but it is kind of fascinating to me because often we say, oh, it's these men in power. Well, I don't know. It's like, that's an interesting thing to me. But I'm obsessed with Justin Bieber and have followed, I follow him on Instagram. Like, I know all about his marriage and the Baldwin girl and the whole thing. So I was like, very invested in this story. And
So Justin, if you're looking for a new pastor, Sarah can be reached at.
I'm here. I have really cool shoes and glasses. But Good Morning America, I think it was Good Morning America, interviewed the woman that Carl Lentz had an affair with, and it was fascinating. It was so interesting because he lied to her. He didn't tell her his last name. He told her he quote unquote worked with celebrities, which is like so funny because I actually know people who are priests who date and like they have to be like, I teach, I work in nonprofit. So that was just Carl Lentz doing that because it's awkward to date and say you're clergy. That was a joke, but she finally figured out who he was. And she said, this was so interesting. She said, I didn't judge him. Like, I knew he was married. I knew he had kids, but I'm not a judgmental person. I didn't judge him. And I was fine with it. So they're having this affair. And then she finds out he's a pastor. And then she breaks it off. Like, that was the impetus for her, which was so interesting to me because it's like, once she sensed the judgment of God, once she felt God coming into this, she ended it. And as a non-believer, right? My mind has been sort of like, I can't even sort that out. Like, my brain keeps trying to process what that means. And I keep wondering if there's something in there. We talk a lot about, that we live under the law, that the law condemns us. But we also say a lot that the law is there for a reason, right? Like, if we were all able to live under the law, if we were all able to follow the law, like, we would have really sweet, beautiful lives. And so where we often want to think that God's judgment is this horrible, horrible thing, on some level, David relates back to what you were saying about the library. Like, God's judgment reminds us that our lives are not in our hands, right? That they're actually in God's hands. And it was so interesting to me that the moment that she realized that this situation was more in the hands of God than anything else, she was like, I'm out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I'm just like, I think for me, it's funny. Like, I sort of followed everything around this story, but that just stopped me in my tracks.
That's so interesting because I have a third take on this. When it comes to Lentz specifically, I wrote this article a couple weeks ago based on some things we talked about in the podcast about men in middle life being very lonely and sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And it got an enormous
Sad
response
clowns.
to people, sad clowns, because men tend not to share things on social media. They just don't do it. But so instead I'm getting text messages and guys being like, oh, so-and-so sent this to me and so thank you so much, or private emails and things like that. It made it sound like it's a real thing. And one of the things I said in that article is that midlife is not, in fact, a time when it's a time when we think we should be at the height of our powers. And we've mastered something when, in fact, in reality, it's the height of your need. It's the time when you are most keeping things together and you feel most confused. Most people in their midlife, it's what I wish I knew what I knew when I was 20. Life has disillusioned me, and so I think of a man like Carl Lentz and not knowing him, and I think that he probably was very lonely, it's narcissism is engineered this situation where there's a lot of yes men, yes people, and a lot of people, who was invested in him continuing to look good, but the man himself was probably dying to be related to as just a person and not as a celebrity and not as the head of this thing. And so this woman came along and yes, there's libido, there's all sorts of other things involved, but the fact that he had to tell her that he was just this dude that she met at a dog park, I think to myself, well, he's trying to get back to who he was before all of this stuff encrusted around him, before he was loved for his performance, and in fact, just a woman was attracted to him because he was sort of a good-looking guy. Yeah. And so I can identify, and
that is so interesting, Dave.
In midlife, a lot of people, and I would say this especially about men, they feel trapped by who they need to be, and so one day they just react, and they almost are. They're confused by it, I think, and then there's a double life, and we know all of the spiritual dynamics about. That go into it.
Can I say one thing? So I've been a little obsessed with Conan O'Brien recently.
Oh, yeah.
He did an interview with Terry Gross maybe 6 months ago or something, which was re-aired because he's doing something new now. He's doing a variety show on HBO, where he's ending his TBS show and doing a variety show. And he talked about a guy who's been through a lot publicly and spoken very honestly about it. But that's what I was struck by. Terry Gross talked about, I guess she was a guest on his show at one point, and she brought her husband along because he was a huge fan of Conan's. And Conan does the show. They come off the stage. Terry introduces her husband to Conan. Conan's very gracious and nice. And then he says, okay, show's over. Time to go back to being depressed. And it was like a little bit of a joke, but it was also true, right? Yeah. And Conan, he's been through a lot. He has done a lot of therapy and recognized that his happiest time is when he's doing the show, when he's performing, when he's up there, when he's not in his head, right? And then the rest of the time, he's kind of a little, anxious and depressed, and he's working on that. But what I was struck by with that is that because he's a comedian, he has the freedom to do that. Like a person in a position of Christian leadership isn't really necessarily allowed.
Oh, they're definitely not allowed.
To be a human being in that kind of way, and that's the pressure that also feeds into the narcissism. Is like your to some degree your congregation needs you to be better than you actually are, more perfect than you actually are. They need you to be available for their whatever their needs might be, and not to be talking about their own. And so or about your own. Dave, I think that's insightful, and Yes, I can only imagine the pressures that were on this guy, even if they were of his own making, and the fact that he couldn't, he's not gonna be giving the commencement speech at Dartmouth, talking about his deep depression after losing the Tonight Show. Yeah, which if you've never seen a Conan speech to Dartmouth is unbelievable, and it's like he had a freedom, I think, that very few pastors have until they have a spectacular failure. Now that he's had a spectacular failure, maybe there'll be more freedom and honesty.
Yeah, because I don't want to gloss over what people the term that's almost it's always existed, but it's more in vogue these days. This spiritual abuse that I think that people can take advantage of your spiritual authority. But what struck me about the story of Carl Lentz, at least in what I've read about it, is that he wasn't sleeping with someone in the congregation. He went outside of those circles. And that to me is just that's where I guess because listen. People who know that I've been very close to one of these scandals, and some of us, and what was incredibly hurtful and awful is the lying that goes on. Yes. And that is what is not so much people. It can handle. It's funny. I feel like I can handle sin, and people screwing up. It's the lying. It's like when you're kids. It's like I can handle you going out and drinking. What I can't handle is you lying to me about it.
Lying is such a trespass,
and it feels like an extra trespass. But I also know from reading books like Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me, that people have very elaborate ways of justifying the things that they do, and why it was important and why it was different. And in fact, of course, it's not different and it's not important. But and Graham goes into that. But in fact, David French goes into it more deeply. So I'm going to read a little bit of what he has to say, because I think he sheds some light on this, because it's only going to continue, by the way. And I think there, but for the grace of God, go I, and I'm glad I've been spared. Yes. I think it's important to be, as I'm in the middle of like getting an offer on books and things like that, it's like, God save us from this level of, transference. David French on the crisis of Christian celebrity. He says, celebrities are human, and we know that human beings are fallen, and thus there will always be spectacular falls from grace. But must they be so frequent? Must they be so constant? Is there something about celebrity itself that makes the fall more likely? After all, in many of these folks, it's quite apparent that something changed. Very few people embrace a life of public ministry as part of a plan for sexual conquest. They begin with a sincere desire to preach and teach and transform lives. The same goes for making money. I mean, there may be some cases, this is Dave speaking, where people are subconsciously attracted to the influence and the power and the ego. But I would say that if you want respect and you want sex, becoming a Christian pastor is not usually
There are easier ways.
There are easier ways.
We'll make a list.
Not an intuitive choice.
Yeah.
Not the obvious
He
choice.
goes on, he says, the celebrity's apparent talent and relevant success teach him to do the things he must not do, which is to trust himself, to believe that he or she is a person of virtue, to believe that they are important. This is particularly dangerous when talent and success almost always create both opportunity and motive for serious sin. Then French says, I've known a number of Christian public figures who haven't fallen, men and women who've lived decades in the public eye and have lived with integrity. And while they've come from different backgrounds and different strands of Christian theology, they've typically shared two common convictions. First, they don't trust their virtue. Second, they don't believe they earned their fame. A person who doesn't trust his own virtue takes affirmative steps to protect himself from a foolish fall. You don't have to map out a full-blown Pence rule to take prudent steps to guard against your own fallen nature. This shouldn't even be a matter of religious controversy. I'm reminded of these powerful words from one of America's most influential progressive atheists, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who says, I've been with my spouse for almost 15 years. In those years, I've never been with anyone but the mother of my son. But that's not because I am an especially good and true person. In fact, I am wholly in possession of an unimaginably filthy and mongrel mind. But I am also a dude who believes in guardrails, as a buddy of mine once put it. I don't believe in getting in the moment and then exercising willpower. I believe in avoiding the moment. I believe the battle is lost at happy hour, not at the hotel. I am not a good man, but I am prepared to be an honorable one. So French continues and says, if a person gains fame, he or she cannot, must not believe the easy laughs, the shining eyes, or the copious flattery of starstruck fans. There are reciprocal responsibilities here. It would be far better if Americans didn't treat celebrities, including religious celebrities, like Greek gods. It would be far better if celebrities didn't start to believe they belong on Mount Olympus. Christian celebrities will continue to fall, but they don't have to fall so often. They don't have to inflict so much pain. Change will only come when Christian leaders remember a few painful truths. Their hearts are deceitful. They do not deserve their fame. God does not need them. Instead, they need him.
Woo, that's a good word.
Good stuff.
I would say, by the way, even if you're a person who doesn't believe your own virtue and don't think you deserve your fame, I still think that things can happen. I think that this is the only qualm I take with this piece is that it presents it a little bit. He's observing it. He's not prescribing it, but I hear it as a prescription. I was like, well, if I just do those things, then it's a silver bullet, a shield from which
I'll be fine.
I'll be fine. And as we all know, there is such things as sin, the flesh, and the devil prowling on people, and putting them in those situations.
Your will is weak. I mean, I totally agree, Dave. Because part of me wanted to be like, so basically just be a Lutheran. But then we all know that guy, so it's like, it's
But I will
tough.
say, if you look at the Bible, there's nothing like what we're talking about in the Bible, and even people. I mean, the Bible just lays bare the sins of all these celebrities. That David is a murderer and a philanderer, and even Paul. I just can't imagine when people were reading Romans, the letter, and he's talking about his own struggle with sin and his inability to be what he knows he ought to be, and how he finds himself keeping doing the things that he knows he ought not to do. They must have been shocked. That he's so transparent about his sin, his struggles, his in a way that is convicting and feels a little dangerous. The way we've set up church, there's no heroes in the Bible except Jesus. Everyone else is a total disaster. And if they're not self-revelatory, sooner or later they get sort of caught. But yeah, it's a weird world we're in now that feels so far from kind of the church of the New Testament.
I think a Christian celebrity is an oxymoron. I don't think it can really work. I just don't. I mean, yes, there's Dorothy Day, and there's John Stott, and there's the people that get profiled and as being these
Billy Graham,
these otherworldly paragons of virtue, Mother Teresa, saintliness. And I do believe in something called holiness and saintliness that is, but it's usually never holding itself up. And some people, they get to the end of the race and they haven't basically fallen on their face in a major way. But you talk to those people, and they're more aware always of their own fallenness and their sin. That's why people were so completely taken aback by Mother Teresa's diaries that revealed to a person who was tormented by her own faithlessness and her own struggle and darkness. But I will say, as it relates to American Christianity, celebrity and Christianity are a no-go. And the problem is that, unfortunately, building your own brand has become such a necessity for selling books and for reaching people. If you've got a message in which you want to reach people, you kind of have to play these games. And some would say, well, maybe you
totally
don't.
Narcissism works.
But narcissism is like... It's rewarded.
A prerequisite.
But celebrity culture itself eats people alive. I mean, I was just thinking about what we're looking at with Britney Spears right now. And I was just, my kids were asking me, which Parent Trap do you like the best? And I was like, well, I love the Lindsay Lohan one. And I love the Haley Mills. But think about Lindsay Lohan. Think about Michael Jackson. Think about all of these, what fame does to people and celebrity does to people. And then you add a God component of favor and blessing onto that, and you just have a recipe for absolute disaster. All the while, the talent is still there. I think Carl Lentz probably really did speak some grace and hope into Justin Bieber's life,
of course,
in a way that is not discounted by this occurrence. But the Christian celebrity is a bit of an oxymoron, and God save us all from more Christian celebrities. And I say that, I say that to the man in the mirror. No pun intended.
I just want to sing it now, but I won't. I mean, I agree, Dave. I think the push that we have to produce more and to get more followers and to be on all these new platforms, and it's relentless. There's like a pattern. One of my friends jokes about, maybe we should cut this because I don't want to deal with the email fallout, but of like Christian, like starts as conservative Christian woman on, social media platforms, gets a ton of followers, has a blog, puts up a muffin recipe, gets a little more progressive, maybe adopts a kid from another country, leaves her husband for a woman. And like, they're like, I've seen this a couple of times, and my friend's always like, you better not get your own blog because your marriage is going to be on the rocks. And so, I mean, I think there is like this weird, which I do want to say, like, when we see men do things like this, yes, men have done a lot more of this kind of stuff than women have, but women, maybe we don't have that same pattern, but we have our own pattern, and so,
there's a narcissism that can, we just have to look at the influencer culture, which is so driven by a lot of my wife was showing me again makeup tutorial videos and was just like, can you believe this one and this one and this one? I was like, oh man, unless they're Mormons, do not trust them. And I'm just kidding.
I know, right?
Even
Only just the Mormons, they can return their library.
They're
books,
not drinking,
and they manage to stay married. Yeah, they're not drinking.
They're heavily medicated, but they're not drinking.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's and then there's. I mean, it's interesting to me. I mean, I don't know how much we want to talk about this. We talked about it a lot, but then there's the glory story, right? So then these guys do what Carl Lentz did, and then they get somehow a second career off of it, or these women's marriage, they get a comeback. These women's marriages are over, and suddenly they have deep clarity about relationships, and so they write books, and so they, I mean, it's really fascinating. Then you actually get to monetize your celebrity even more, and then at the end of the day, what is even left in your soul? I'm just what is even how much emptiness is refracting around in your heart? It's just, it's so overwhelming to me. I mean, it is why I find that whole kind of thing really terrifying. And I feel great compassion for Carl. I feel great compassion for Rachel. You know, I feel great compassion for these people because you know, I would love, I mean, that the guy that gave the beautiful advice you read, I wish it were that easy, Dave, but I really, really think that for so many of us, our wills are so weak that we believe the lies, you know, and then we just become them.
Yeah. There's a prayer at the beginning of one of the records that has really gotten me through this year is the new record by The Killers, Imploding the Mirage, and there's a song on there called Running Towards a Place, and it opens with Brandon Flowers saying, "Give me the eyes that I may see, the good in my people and the trouble in me. Give me the hands that I may lift, the weight of another who's starting to drift." I think that to see the good in other people, but the trouble in yourself, to keep you humble while also loving other people, is the prayer for
The log
for
in your
all
own
of us.
Yeah.
So I thought we'd end with a piece that was written in 2012 by the academic Walter Russell Mead, who is a political scientist and who works at Bard College in New York. And he wrote something about the meaning of Advent for the American interest back in 2012. And it's remarkable to me, as someone who is a little bit, again, rolling his eyes about the Advent craze, tempted to, especially in a year when everything feels like Advent, is like enough already.
Yes.
But this is what he wrote. He said, "As a kid, I could never understand why Advent was a season of fasting and solemnity in the church rather than a time of feasting and dancing. What better way to prepare for a really big celebration than to have a lot of little celebrations as you approach it? What better way to get into the mood? But as I've reflected on the holiday over the years, I think I see more reason for making Advent a season of restraint and reflection rather than anticipatory fun. We can never really understand Christmas unless we understand how much we need that baby in the manger. Advent is a time to think about the ways that life without God is an empty husk. I remember Christopher Hitchens saying once that we are all like mud balls, catapulted up into the air and sailing along very nicely, but that one day all of us will hit something and go splat. Advent is a time to remember that it will all end and end in a splat. There are those who think that we should try not to think about depressing subjects like that, but in fact, the ability to face the prospect of life's end with some dignity and courage is part of what makes the rest of life rich and worth living. For Christians, and nobody else really has much business thinking about Advent or observing it, there is something else. If there is no Christmas, there is no cross, no answer to the problems of sin, separation, failure, and pain. Advent is a time to think about what life would be like if we didn't have faith in a Redeemer, a Savior who is ready, willing, and able to complete the broken arc of our lives, forgive what is past, and walk with us step by step to help us build something better in the time that is left. Advent is a time to remember that we need something more than what we can summon with our own resources to make our lives work. It is a time to remember how lost we would be if someone hadn't come to find us. Thank you, Walter Russell Mead.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Here we go.
Take him down a notch, Sarah.
I just feel so deeply what RJ was saying earlier, and this is a little bit me putting words in his mouth, but this feels like a really long Advent. It just feels like we've been in some sort of a waiting period for a long time. Personally speaking, I am already having a panic attack that Christmas will be over at some point. Like, because I'm so desperate for Christmas. Like, I'm so desperate for the message of Christmas. And I think every year I kind of have that pervasive feeling that, like, you know, it's almost like that it's almost like Conan O'Brien saying, like, now the show's over, so now I'm going to be depressed. Like, that's almost what, like, the day, even the afternoon of Christmas feels like, right? Like, it's all done. And yes, I know all the reasons why. I know about the 12 days of Christmas. But I'm already worried about what it will feel like when Christmas is over. And so, in some ways, I don't understand this Advent at all, because I feel like I feel like it's the most Adventy of all Advents. And I also feel like I'm trying to just really move into Christmas because I'm sick of waiting. So I don't know. I mean, I'm in a, I'm kind of struggling a little bit. I will say when I read this, the first thought I had, which is what I should have said instead of the F word in regards to a liturgical season, is that Batteries Not Included should be a Christmas movie.
Yes. Say why. Say why.
Because something beautiful comes from the outside, and it's these little robots that are aliens that no one explains where they came from or why they came. There's no explanation. And they save a community. They save a building in the most unexpected, come from the outside as an alien life force kind of way.
I gotta watch. I gotta show that to my kids tonight.
It's just, we own it. It's so gorgeous. And I think it should totally be like it. People are watching a lot of Christmas movies, and I would suggest that Batteries Not Included is the one Advent movie.
Include it. Include it.
Yeah.
That is so true, Sarah. I just am so glad that's a Holy Spirit suggestion. I love that movie so much.
It's good.
Rutger?
I was thinking last night, one of the big stresses right now, I'm sure for pastors all across the country, is still like, what is Christmas going to look like? What is Christmas Eve going to look like? What is Christmas Day going to look like?
Yeah.
We have a plan. We have a plan.
Right. Do you have a plan? Not a plan to vote. We've done that. Now you have another plan.
We have a plan. Which is to have Christmas Eve out on our beautiful front lawn in front of our church, and it's Florida, so we can do that, right?
That's amazing.
As long as and we're no longer in hurricane season apparently, although you never know. But even that is starting to feel a little dangerous. The infection rate is high, and people are scared, and we're 2 weeks out from Thanksgiving, and are we going to see? We're in the middle of the third wave, and so I was thinking, what is it going to look like if we don't even do that and we just have a live streamed service from the church and people are at home watching it on their televisions, and it just feels so lonely and terrible. And then I'm like, the first Christmas must have been pretty lonely and terrible. Mary and Joseph by themselves, far from home, no room in the inn, laying their firstborn in a manger.
Teenagers.
They themselves.
Strangely, like a Christmas celebrated at home with just your very closest family, having a word of hope being broadcast to you from the outside in might be the most Christmassy possible thing. It would, if that's going to be Christmas, it's going to require kind of a miracle for it to be Christmas. And that's what Christmas is every year, right? Christmas is a miracle every year. And we need this miracle of this unexpected, frail, fragile, quiet Savior being born in the midst of the most unexpectedly difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
And that's where we are. So I'm not terribly hopeful about Christmas, but maybe that's exactly the right place to be. I mean, as Mary was on donkey back, great with child, being, what is going on? Did I eat something strange for lunch when I thought I saw that angel show up? Like, this cannot be the way it's supposed to happen. And it was exactly the way it was supposed to happen, right? God breaking in the midst of pain and isolation, uncertainty, fear. So that's my hope. Gosh, I hope whatever Christmas ends up being, I hope it feels like a miracle.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
I love that, RJ.
That's great.
I mean, I think it's funny when we're in trauma, which, just to name, we're all in right now. I think it's hard for us to understand where God is in it. And I think I think there's no forcing yourself to be like, I feel the Lord right now. If I just do this, I'll feel the Lord more, which if that isn't like a lot of the Advent practice in Christianity, I don't know what is. It's just knowing God is there. That is where I can find my rest right now. So.
Wow. Oh, guys, thank you both for showing up today. That's a powerful place to end. And thank you so much for listening, and we wish you a happy Advent.
Blessed Advent.
Blessed Advent.
This
I got to go get started on that personal blog, guys.
This episode brought to you by Lexapro. Okay, much love. Jingle bells.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by TJ Hester. And if you like what you've heard, please drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating or review. Until next time.